Hello, everyone, and welcome to True Words Aren't Beautiful. Today, we are going to talk about boundaries, shadow work, and discrimination. Not the discrimination as in bigotry, but discrimination for filtering, categorizing, and organizing. So, just to share some things that have happened recently. First, I had to deal with a stalker. Someone who I used to know started appearing in my neighborhood, and he would send me messages or call me demanding to talk to me, asking for help. And when I refused to give him help, he started becoming very volatile. And it's around that time I put two and two together that the guy has been struggling with his own demons and his addictions. So when I'm not there to provide him another means of exploitation, in turn he lashes out at me. And I'm wondering, why are you so angry at me for not giving you shelter? Why are you angry that I'm not giving you money or food or indulging you to dump all your problems on me? Why is it my responsibility to deal with you and your problems and deal with the consequences of your mistakes in your life? I'm not responsible for you, so why are you angry at me for not indulging that? And I had to go to the police and deal with that. And right now they have a little bit of an investigation going on, particularly because the guy started appearing in front of my building. The guy started just somehow being everywhere I am. And that made me very uncomfortable because I'm saying, why is my life so important to you that you need to know exactly where I am and what I'm doing? Why is it that you can't take no for an answer? And at the same time, I see him as a pattern of neediness in my own life, where I would go for help and validation and support instead of going inward first. This pattern I've noticed as well with other things that have made me uncomfortable, such as when someone called me at 5 in the morning when I was mountaineering a couple months ago to talk about what I consider first world problems, which he calls human problems, and those first world problems, well, complaining about his girlfriend and his relationship. And I'm thinking, we can talk about this when I'm back in the city, in person, not at 5 in the morning when I'm trying to get away from all of this. It's an imposition. And in turn, when this person's called out on this, he justifies himself in saying, well, you made the decision to accept this. And my thinking is, well, if the decision is on me for accepting your imposition, then the decision is on me to basically say, all right, so I will not deal with you anymore, because this is my hard boundary. A one-off is fine, especially if it's an emergency. But if it's non-essential, don't dump yourself on me and say, well, I would do the same for you. Well, it's nice you would do the same for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I would go to you for whatever I need help with. Another instance is when a person I knew started skipping songs because they made that person feel uncomfortable since they were sad songs. They were ruining the mood. And I asked the person, are you afraid of processing uncomfortable emotions? And the person didn't know how to answer. Or another time when I'm asking a question online in Philippine politics, asking, so what does the other side think about this? What is their opinion about this? And several people said, you don't need to know what they're thinking, or, oh, you're wasting your time figuring out what they're thinking. And my problem with that response is they're deciding for me what is important. And what is important for me is to understand why some people think the way they do. I might not agree with the way they're thinking, but I want to understand their process. Because in understanding their process, it allows me to be more empathic and more compassionate, just like it allows me to understand where I might be making some of those mistakes. So, in light of these patterns and these encounters recently, I'm going to go back and define boundaries, discrimination, and shadow work. So, with boundaries, These are the borders. These are the things that help us determine what is acceptable or what is not. The kind that says, hey man, you can step this close to me, but once you start going beyond this space or this line, I'm going to get uncomfortable. And if you insist on getting this close to me, I'm going to make sure that I am not uncomfortable, which includes stepping away or pushing you away. Those are boundaries, whether they are physical boundaries or emotional and social boundaries. And, of course, professional boundaries. Then, shadow work. Shadow work comes from Jungian philosophy. The shortest version to define shadow work is the part of ourselves that we don't want the public to know about, which is a stark contrast to our public persona. Our public persona is what we believe in who we are. That is what the me is when we talk about me. That is what the I is when we talk about me. And we try to control how others see me, myself, and I. And when someone contradicts that and we get defensive, that is our shadow self coming out and saying, no, that's not me. In truth, it's the me that others can see hidden beneath the public facade and persona. And we are uncomfortable because we don't want them to see that, which is the no, I don't want you to see the mole behind my ear. No, I don't want you to see the messages where I had a meltdown and I was saying, fuck you, to people when I didn't really need to. So, that is the shadow. The shadow is the part that we are uncomfortable with because we don't acknowledge it. But the shadow can also be our best friend because it's the parts of us that needs to be addressed and expressed, acknowledged, seen, and nurtured so that we know our lesser selves are not perfect, but we also know that they can be improved upon until the difference between the shadow and the public self, the public persona, are no different from the other because we are whole, we are self-accepting, we are self-compassionate. And we also know how not to impose either our public self, no matter how brilliant we think that public self is, and we know how not to trauma dump because the shadow is desperately seeking to be seen and heard. Finally, there's discrimination, which is recognizing what is important and what isn't, filtering things out, categorizing. And discrimination is what helps you catch yourself and say, wait, I shouldn't be telling people that I took a dump and the shape and the stench of my shit. I've seen people in college talk about their shit in public, not just in the lunchroom, but in an old meme which was 25 things about me that you probably didn't know. A girl, for example, on that list, in my friends list, tagged me in that note and said, oh, when I was a baby, I ate poop. I said, I don't need to hear about this. I don't need to know 25 things about you. I don't even need to know one thing about you. I need to treat things as a need-to-know basis. These 25 things are not necessary to know. So, when I read through them, I was a bit appalled by some of the things people chose to share. And the effects years later are people are oversharing. And that's why we have a lot of trauma dumping. And at the same time, the bizarre contradiction is people are saying you should get a therapist. But those same people saying you should get a therapist are complaining all the time. And whether they have a therapist or not, they seem to treat the entire world as their sounding board or their therapist. What they really want is attention and validation. You can see this when they allude to their problems in vague social media updates targeting specific people, but when others who are not part of that target audience express concern, they get angry and say, oh, mind your own business. I say, well, I don't know. If someone looks like he's about to cut himself, I am going to say, are you okay? Do you need help? Especially if they may not be around the right circle of people who can help. If I see someone, for example, surrounded by people who want to take drugs and they don't know any better, I'll say, you don't have to listen to those people, right? Because I want to offer people options if they're willing to accept them. But if they want to be miserable and listen to those same drug addicts or other people with their violent tendencies, I say, okay, well, you listen to them and you keep complaining, but I'm just going to ignore you moving forward because it's obvious you want specific attention and specific kinds of support and attention from people, and I'm not going to give that. I'm going to look for the third, fourth, and fifth option, and that is not what some people want. They want attention and they want someone to validate them. It's fine to validate people, but it's another thing to indulge, and I don't like to indulge. And I especially do not like being indulged once I realize, oh wait, this is probably not healthy or helpful. So one of the things I learned is that suffering comes from ignorance. And ignorance, the cure for ignorance is wisdom, which most people might gain from experience. And experience comes from mistakes. If people are fortunate and open, they can learn from other people's mistakes, which is their wisdom. But if they're not, they repeat the same mistakes again and again, going through cycle after cycle until they learn. And if they're interested in learning, they will figure it out. Someone will hit them and say, hey, listen, like Navi from Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. If not, they will remain perpetually frustrated doing the same thing again and again, which is insanity, and expecting different results. And my own mistakes, again, from not working on my shadow, not recognizing boundaries and discrimination, I myself would overshare. I believe that trauma dumping and arguing were important to get what I wanted. Before my pilgrimage and my self-work, I would overshare because I thought it was me being authentic and vulnerable. But in actuality, for the most part, this is a burden. I become a drag, and I'm unwanted and I'm unpleasant. Because not everyone needs to hear about abusive parents or narcissistic parents or struggles I've gone through. You have to discriminate who is your audience. It's the difference between being vulnerable and being needy for attention. So I didn't recognize that oversharing is not helpful. I didn't recognize that trauma dumping is a thing. I thought I needed people to know, to understand, and if they understood, they'd be more supportive. Instead, it only validated their wariness to avoid me. Likewise, arguing. That is refusing to listen and are demanding others to come around to your means of thinking, your way of thinking. No amount of arguing will ever change someone's mind, no matter how many fallacies you recognize, no matter how clever you think you are, no matter how many examples you demonstrate. It's best to step away, because if others do care and they do want to follow you, they will do so. But the only way to get most people to follow you, if they're not currently following you, is to observe your actions, because arguing will never appeal to their better self. It will only make them more defensive and self-certain. So I can't tell someone to listen to me. I can't force them to understand me. They're only going to understand what they're going to understand. Arguing solves nothing, so it's best that I step back and allow people to believe what they believe, and if they're unwilling to change, accept them. Accept that they're going to follow what they believe, and let them be, but don't welcome them back into my circle. By processing when I was on my pilgrimage, I decontextualized. I physically decontextualized. I stepped outside of my framework. I left one well for another, one circle for another. And in doing so, it makes it easier to disassociate from one reality to another. And when I can physically do that from one social circle to one physical environment, it becomes much easier to mentally take a breath and step back and say, this is not reality. That's not reality. This is just one corner of reality. And at the same time, it's also easier not to carry those thoughts or those identities with you. Because who I was in college, I don't have to be the exact same person in this corner of Manila. Likewise, who I am in Manila now does not matter to someone who's never met me when I'm in Osaka in Japan. They don't care about who I was, they care about who I present myself as in that moment. And we are always a summary of all our experiences, thoughts, and emotions, and frameworks and tools. So, when you decontextualize and step into a new social circle or social network and social environment, you don't have to be who you were yesterday, or even this morning, or even 5 minutes ago. You can recreate yourself again and again. Yet, many of us seem to bring our garbage with us. Even if you're trying to do the eat, pray, love thing, there are things that you're unintentionally carrying, and you will continue to do so until someone points it out, and you make the effort to discard it. So, I have found better ways to acknowledge and express my shadow so that it doesn't erupt and force itself out. It creates clear-cut boundaries and helps me to be detached. It helps me to decide which parts of myself I should share and protect my core self and my circle without risking being seen as disingenuous. There are parts of myself I'm willing to share when I'm amongst artists, and parts of myself I'm willing to share when amongst mountaineers, and there are parts of myself that are better understood from fellow Zennials and third culture kids. I can't force everyone to know every single part about me, and it's not their responsibility. By having my outlet from drawing monsters, I see not only is my skill improving, but I give them a home on the canvas and the pages of my art journal. By writing, those thoughts don't explode in my mind, desperately seeking to be heard. By volunteering, I give myself a sense of purpose and know that I live for someone else beyond myself and my indulgences and desires and my constant need for validation and attention. Even just taking care of my dogs is a means of giving myself purpose. By using my martial yoga, physical exertion, mountaineering, fitness, I am able to exert myself and not feel so weak and helpless. By cooking, I know I can sustain myself and also care for others. By going to therapy, I know I'm with people who can catch me and say, "Aha, do you hear yourself?" To help me be better able to catch myself instead of justifying myself. All these different outlets, all these different methods and modalities are specific medicines for specific sicknesses. If you just go to the gym all the time like some people I knew, they are not going to address the other needs that are best addressed through therapy or through art. This goes with every other modality I mentioned. You can even think about how peaceful someone who makes death metal music is. They might, or industrial music, or goth music. There are so many people I've spoken with who enjoy going to Nine Inch Nails concerts and listen to that music because they relate to the lyrics. They don't feel so alone. So many of my favorite artists, like Yukio Tsushima, Zlatoslav Bektinsky, H.R. Geiger, Francis Bacon. All of these people make dark and dreary art, but they're very chill individuals for the most part. Other artists I know who've drawn gory things and depressing things are happy because they have a means of expressing their demons up to a certain point. So, by just doing shit, which is what all this comes down to, by exploring and experimenting, we have a means to allow our shadows rather, to run and play and not be repressed. We have a place for the shadow here, not here. The shadow does not need to go here and subtly and unsubtly force itself out through the trauma dumping, through the vague social media posting, through exploding and not being self-aware. Being aware of your shadow, being aware of your persona and who you think you should be, and who you present yourself as versus who you really are. When these two integrate, you don't need to seek attention. You don't need to feel bad about people's response to who you are. You know who you are. Just like Shakespeare said in Macbeth, know yourself and master yourself, and no one will ever be able to destroy you or dominate you. Those may not be the exact words, but that is the spirit, the essence of that message. So there's a contrast in people who don't know discrimination, boundaries, and shadow work, and I'll look at it also from my culture experience as an American and as an Asian. Walking around the streets of San Francisco, the streets of Manhattan, the streets of Los Angeles, and even just going on social media, I've seen people exploding in public, sharing how awful life is to anyone and everyone, ranting, whether they're writing on social media or recording themselves complaining about things. And I'm saying, are you sure you want to self-incriminate? In contrast, many Eastern cultures, especially the Philippines, especially China, especially Japan, I see people not only focusing on social harmony, but also refusing in private to address their uncomfortable emotions and process them. The West is volatile because they lack the discrimination and the boundaries, or the acknowledgement of healthy shadow work. They feel that, oh, I can express myself however I want. Well, yeah, you can express yourself however you want, but there are going to be consequences because whether people are aware of it or not, there's a tendency for human beings to avoid discomfort. It's in our nature consistently to avoid discomfort. And with a negativity bias, if you make someone uncomfortable, all you're going to do is repel them, knowingly and unknowingly, both from you and from them. They'll consciously and unconsciously avoid you, and you will unconsciously continue to repel them. Whereas in the Asian context, it's volatile. It's like a volcano that can explode at any moment, a ticking time bomb, because compared to many places in the West, there are mental health resources. Whereas over here, there's a constant a values dissonance, which says, you're not allowed to feel this way, you're overreacting. Oh, get over it, stop being depressed. This is not healthy. This is not helpful. This basically tells people they're not allowed to feel. And if they're not allowed to feel, then they're not allowed to process. And if they're not allowed to process, you have a nuclear explosion from every individual set to go off simultaneously. And this is what leads to political movements which are violent. This leads to social unrest, which is violent. So, on an individual and societal level, we need to develop the ability to discriminate what is okay and what's not okay, and shadow work. Yes, you can call for help, but society is not responsible for taking care of your shadows. You are. You can call for help, but you shouldn't expect everyone to know exactly what kind of help you need. And sadly, there are even some professionals who may not be able to help you, even in the appropriate field, because not all therapists, psychotherapists, are created equal. Some have their own style. One thing I've noticed about a lot of people in the Philippines is they say, I shouldn't feel this way, or, oh, well, I'm just overreacting. This messaging from social influences breaks down who you are as a person. It doesn't allow you to feel. It tells you you're not allowed to feel. Or you go to the People's Republic of China. Again, you're not allowed to feel there. You must act in a certain approved way. And people in the West say, oh, it's just like us. I say, no. You have resources, institutional level resources, societal level resources. But places like China and the Philippines don't always have those resources, and if they do, they're very limited. The quality is also very limited. So if you have the means of addressing your shadows, if you have the means of taking care of yourself, don't let who you think you should be get in the way of that. Accept your shadow. Work with it. When you're not okay with yourself, and you don't know how to deal with your shadow. You will see external means of placating the shadow, which can never be satiated unless you go to the root cause. Retail therapy, trauma dumping, distracting yourself by being busy and the overglorification of being busy, checking off bucket lists, and escaping on holiday. Those will never satiate you. It's the unending desire. It is the demon which, when you cut it, as soon as a drop of blood touches the ground, a copy of that demon exists. That is desire. When others come seeking help, if you are unable to help yourself, you may be angry at them when they are struggling with their means of processing if it doesn't match yours. And if they don't know how to process and it doesn't follow your framework, you become impatient with them, saying, I know how to cope, you should. Well, when you're at peace, you can establish boundaries and discriminate, oh, he just doesn't know. And you won't get upset, they won't get upset, nothing needs to result to violence. And if they do get upset, you accept that they're just not interested in your framework because you can only provide so much, and you should only provide so much, because their trauma dumping, their suffering is not your responsibility. And yes, when someone is grieving loss, you can only offer so much help, and if they don't want to get help, they're either not ready for it or they're uninterested in your process, and that's okay. But if they start getting in your face for not following their process, this is where you draw up the boundaries and say, hey, there's only so much I can do, and this is what I'm offering. And you don't like that. Don't ask me to change my process for you, because I'm following my process for myself. I'm not imposing my process on you, so don't tell me to change my process completely, not just for you, but for me. The discomfort that people have, the way they process things, affects how they perceive things. There are people who've trivialized me being stalked, and I've been stalked by several different people in life. I had a girl in college who would follow me around and draw pictures of me and paste them to my wall. I had people who would follow me into the bathroom, talk to me while I'm urinating, and I'd say, can you step back? I'm trying to urinate. They would talk to me, even when I'd go into a stall. I'd say, you know I'm taking a dump, right? My own mother, by the way, doesn't know boundaries. She would unlock the door, and I'd say, Mom, I'm taking a shit! I know, but I just need to tell you something. Mom! Stand outside! Okay, but you can't hear me from outside the door. I say, Mom! Don't talk to me when I'm in the bathroom. It's locked for a reason. The door is closed for a reason. Talk to me later. Well, I am your mother. I can talk to you. I said, no! So, this is an example of someone who doesn't know boundaries. And when you tell them you're asserting your boundaries, they get upset and defensive. And they justify themselves. There are people whose experiences and conclusions are based off of vague ideas and platitudes, but when confronted with a real thing, they got uncomfortable. They follow nice words and presentation. If the real thing arrives, if they're unfamiliar with it, they will dismiss it, they'll trivialize it. I had people joke about my stalking, and I was thinking to myself, if you ever wake up seeing the same guy following you everywhere, standing outside of your building, sending you unpleasant messages, even when you've warned them to leave you alone, you will feel uncomfortable. Likewise, people who are just unfamiliar will trivialize your achievements and say, this is not who you are, you're lying, because it goes against their image of who you are. This is not about me protecting my public persona. This is me saying, actually, let me show you the facts. There are people say, I've never done voiceover work, and I've never acted. Then I show them my video commercials, and then they get quiet. There are people saying, oh, you don't have all these experiences, you're lying about where you've lived. Then I show them Sri Lanka, I show them Indonesia, I show them New York, I show them Northampton. And then they get quiet because they're proven wrong. They say you're not a writer because you haven't been published in any major works, and I show them where I have been published. They say, oh, you didn't go to UCLA. I show them a copy of my BA. And many times, if this isn't enough to prove who I am or what I've done, they will say, oh, that's Photoshop. Oh, that's just something you got off of Google. At this point, nothing is going to work. Their idea of who I am will never change, and it's my shadow seeking to assert itself and protect the public persona that comes out and wants to fight. But if my shadow is placated, if I know how to grieve, if I know how to deal with my anger and my traumas, I don't need to prove myself. And those are people who I will never need to care about proving myself to because they don't matter. My shadow and my wounds are related to believing that I'm dumb and unworthy. My achievements, however, prove that I'm anything but. My shadow work allows me to remind myself daily that I'm worthy, and my interest in learning shows that I'm not dumb, but it also serves to remind me that I don't know everything. By respecting and acknowledging and honoring my shadow, I have clear-cut boundaries for what is cool and what isn't, what I can give and what I won't give, especially my time and attention, and especially with regards to other people. I can immediately discriminate instead of bunching together everything arbitrarily. So, understand boundaries. Just understand how to discriminate boundaries. Discriminate who your ideal self is, your public persona, and your shadow. Integrate them. Accept them. This is enough work for yourself. So, why get concerned about how other people react to how you present yourself or how they perceive you? Stuff to think about, stuff to think about, stuff to think about. Thank you for watching. I will catch you again the next time.